America fell in love with you, didn't they?
Well, I think the thing is, if you are a British artist, actor, whatever, and you go to America, very often they just kind of close the door and go, "We've got that covered, thanks."
Yes.
No. And for whatever reason, it worked. And I've got to be honest, having the record work there in America, and it was a #1 and everything, it just changes things a little bit. I don't know whether it still has the same effect today.
Sure,
I don't know.
it does. Look at One Direction.
But, yeah, I mean, it's you even come back here, and the media treat you slightly differently.
Well, look at Harry Styles.
Yeah.
Harry Styles, in many ways, you were like Harry Styles there.
I wouldn't go that far. I love Harry Styles.
No, you would never go that far, but you actually were.
No, well, I did. We did have a moment going. It definitely was like this is pretty great, because
Virgin Radio.
Let's go for the T-Boy years.
Oy,
all right.
okay.
So the T-Boy years, they definitely did happen. They didn't happen quite as Pete Waterman said they happened afterwards. Pete gets a lot of column inches in the book. Fascinating character, Pete Waterman.
Rightfully so. I mean, without them, obviously, I would not be here. Literally today.
Without question.
Yeah, and I think I was.
Give us the T-Boy bit.
Okay, right. So I was in a band. Pete came to see the band. There was
FBI?
a few bands playing that night, and he only really was interested in signing a singer anyway. He wasn't, that wasn't completely apparent in the very beginning, but it sort of became apparent. Yeah. And I didn't sign straight away. Also, let's just go back to the fact that nobody knew who Stock Aitken Waterman were. Yeah. Maybe a few other people in London, studios may have known who they were, but they weren't a household name by a long way. Hadn't had a proper major, big record yet. And so I signed a deal with them in the anticipation that I'd probably maybe do a single with these guys who've got a studio in London. That was kind of about the level I was thinking at. And lo and behold, they have this record, We're Dead or Alive, that just goes boom. And
was the first time you heard it, you thought, this is good.
It's a great record, don't it? I mean, even if you don't like that kind of music and pop music in general, you've got to go, there's something about that record. It is.
It's a beast.
Yeah, and I heard it, and I just sort of thought, maybe there's something,
Maybe they do know what they're doing.
Yeah. And then they just kept doing it. They had the Princess record as well.
#1, which was a monster song
great
again.
record as well. And also really different. That's the thing. People pigeonhole the Stock Aitken Waterman thing as just being, it all sounded the same. Yeah. Well, listen to Dead or Alive and Princess. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I
then
mean?
listen to Roadblock.
Yeah. And also Mel and Kim. It was quite varied, I think. And obviously describing some of those records and whatever, it sort of puts me in mind of the fact that I'm sat there going, well, what about me? When are you going to make a record? You actually signed me, never mind. I'm not on another label that you get, you signed me. And they just got super busy. So Pete, I think it was a good move, said, this kid's going to lose the plot. Why don't we get him down to London? Didn't really think about where I was going to live. So I ended up living at his flat, which is amazing in itself, because I'm literally going into work with him every day in his Porsche. And he's on the phone, the big old brick-style phone. Yeah. And he's ranting and raving some mornings, and he's chatting other mornings, not to me, like on the phone to people about deals and about this, And I don't really know what he's talking about, but it was kind of like, it was great. It was like a tiny bit like being in a movie.
Such a good book, people.
A bit being in a movie.
Oh, my gosh.
But so my job while I was there was to make tea, like all the other juniors. Yeah. Go get the sandwiches. In fact, when we were coming over here this morning, we drove past the Borough Tube to get here, and right next door to the Borough Tube main entrance is what used to be John's Caff, and every meal that everyone ate in that building came from John's Caff. Wow. And so we'd run around there as well and get the sandwiches and everything. So I got tea and sandwiches for Dead or Alive, Mel and Kim, Bananarama, and others.
And they were in and out, weren't they?
Yeah,
and it was exciting. And you learned loads of stuff. I'm sure you learned.
Yeah, one of the greatest things about being in their building for me personally was to be around actual hit records, because people work in recording studios and don't come across a hit record for months. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we've made this album. Yeah, no one's going to hear it, because it just doesn't happen. They were doing things that were on the radio a few weeks later, and that was an amazing...
Sometimes days later?
Well, days later, yeah. It was like the energy of that is unbelievable, actually. They're actually...
Well, that's what happened in the 60s. That's how the Beatles
exactly.
recorded.
It was a bit more like that, exactly. Yeah. But also, I kind of feel that, one of the main things for me was that I got to do my demos, and I'd do it with their equipment in their studios. Yeah. So you're using a desk which is at the time was worth like £500,000 or whatever, with all their synths and all their everything, because they kind of had every eventually, as it really took off, they built more studios, but they just equipped them pretty much exactly the same. So they could be in any room. They could split up even, like Matt could be in one, Mike could be in another, and they'd just work on different tracks, but they're working with the same equipment and everything. So, you know what I mean? They could kind of keep that thing that they wanted when they developed that sound. So I got to work in those studios through the night and at the weekends, but I also did it with engineers who were engineering number one records. Yeah. And they'd be engineering for me and kind of like, you know.
It was in the air, wasn't it?
It was just amazing.
You were breathing the same oxygen.
Yeah, it was great. And that's what led, really, I think, partly to me getting songs on the first album and Pete eventually ranting and raving about a song I'd written that became my first single on the second album, which is called She Wants to Dance With Me. Yeah,
which is a great song.
Thank you, my love.
And that was like a sort of tribute to Whitney Houston and all this kind of stuff.
For me, I won't say ripping it off because I'll be sued, but I was kind of like, I know Pete Waterman loves this song.
Yeah.
I Want to Dance With Somebody.
Exactly.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to try and do something in that ballpark, and that's how that was sort of born.
And by the way, there are so many. I hope you cannot ignore the fact that there are so many stories here, and they're all great, and they're with such conciseness. Again, down to Alexi and yourself. This is why it's so patient. I literally could not put this book down yesterday. This book will be number one. Rick Astley, Never, the autobiography. It will be number one. I guarantee this will be a Sunday Times number one bestseller. I guarantee it. So. From there, we could go to how Never Gonna Give You Up happened and the number one single for about number one single. But we've got so much to get through. Here's what we're going to do. We've got 7 minutes left. We're going to do America and we're going to do Lena, right? And you can...
She'll be out of the building in a minute.
So stay tuned for Lena. Let's go to America.
Okay.
And let's move on from Stock Aitken Waterman, which is important. Of course, it's important. But what was America like? It was entirely different. You knocked George Michael off the number one slot, not once, but twice. He called you up. He said, I don't know who you are. Apparently, you know Rick Astley. Pack it in. Give us a break, will you, Rick? None of this is fair.
Not quite. Quite. No.
But America fell in love with you, didn't they?
Well, I think the thing is, if you are a British artist, actor, whatever, and you go to America, very often they just kind of close the door and go, "We've got that covered, thanks."
Yes.
No. And for whatever reason, it worked. And I've got to be honest, having the record work there in America and it was the number one and everything, it just changes things a little bit. I don't know whether it still has the same effect today.
Sure,
I don't know.
Does. Look at One Direction.
But, yeah, I mean, it's you even come back here and the media treat you slightly differently.
Well, look at Harry Styles.
Yeah.
Harry Styles, in many ways, you were like Harry Styles then.
I wouldn't go that far. I love Harry Styles.
No, you would never go that far, but you actually were.
No, well, I did. We did have a moment going. It definitely was like this is pretty great, you know, because
you could have been a bit as big as you wanted to be.
It was definitely opening up, and there were a lot of things, and I mentioned in the book as well that like I almost did like a Coca-Cola commercial, which was madness because the only people who did that were the absolute creme de la creme of, you know what I mean, like some of the biggest names ever. And it was like, I think they just wanted some young kid, i.e. me.
Okay, can we just speak to that a minute? Because that's really, I was going to get to that, actually. So what's really interesting about that is, once again, people who are there to represent you, misrepresenting you. No names, no patrial. But you thought it was like the biggest opportunity ever. Not only do you get paid, but you get a worldwide advert for whatever song it is they want you to see. And apparently the deal was scuppered by somebody who said, they're not paying you enough, it's disrespectful. That's just, I mean, we've all, in this business, we've all had our own version or versions of that. Yeah. But that is insane. Sorry, back to...
Yeah, no, it kind of, I'm not so exactly sure how and what and where and the ins and outs of it, but it kind of broke down at some point where we didn't do it. And
it would have been in your interest to do it.
Absolutely.
They were paid to look after your interest, and they didn't do that.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes people are trying to do the best for you, but maybe they just misjudge it and get it wrong. You know, anyway.
There's getting it wrong. There's getting it wrong, and there's messing up a Coca-Cola advert, isn't there?
But what it said to me was, what it kind of brought home to me was that, okay, so that's where we could be going. Do you know what I mean? To even be considered for one. Yeah. Funnily enough, I did 4 Japanese commercials for a soft drink in Japan, and the moment that kind of we all just went, "Yeah, we're doing it," because we'd sort of had the kind of and we didn't really have to have that explained.
When was that,
It was early 80s, sorry, late 80s again. It was early on, and we shot one of them in one of Liberace's old houses in LA with the piano-shaped swimming pool and the whole thing and everything. Wow. I mean, honestly, some of those things, you know, the movie Lost in Translation.
Of course.
honest to God, we've laughed so many times about that.
It's
and
true.
in the connection of it, of like, it's so... But you can take out the prostitute. There was no prostitute involved. We'll leave that aside.
It went without saying, but you said it. That's right up there with breakfast at Burt Bacharach's house, isn't it?
Oh, my word, that was amazing. And he was such an amazing guy.
Absolute dude.
Yeah, just a gorgeous man. But I got
Did he ever take you to the basketball? Because he's a massive basketball fan.
No, I didn't get to know him in that way. He was looking, and his then wife, Carl Baesega, they were looking to work with young artists, just people who were just on the scene. Again, that was what America did. It was kind of like, hold the phone. Burt Bacharach, what are you talking about? How does he even know who I am? But that's what it was bringing.
And it's instant.
Yeah.
Once you go over there, once they want you, they really want you.
Kind of, I think, is it? Yeah.
Virgin Radio.